My name is Samantha Sharp, and our disease presentation is on gonorrhea. Gonorrhea is a contagious disease transmitted most often through sexual contact with an infected person. The bacteria that causes gonorrhea is called Neisseria gonorrhoeae. It is named after a German physician named Albert Ludwig Sigismund Neisser, who discovered the pathogen of gonorrhea in 1879. The Gram stain result for gonorrhea is negative, which means this bacteria has an outer membrane, a thin peptidoglycan layer, and a cell membrane. Gram staining is a technique to make bacteria more visible by adding crystal violet to the cells in a smear. All cells, whether positive or negative, will stain purple. The Gram's iodine is added. This is a stabilizer that causes the dye to form large complexes in the form of peptidoglycan of the cell. The dye will not be firmly trapped in Gram-negative bacteria because they do not have a thick wall of peptidoglycan. Alcohol is added to dissolve lipids in the outer membrane, only found in Gram-negative cells, and removes the dye from the peptidoglycan layer. This leaves the Gram-negative cells colorless. In order to demonstrate their presence, a counterstain safranin is added, making the Gram-negative cell resemble the color red. At this point, scientists know it is a Gram-negative cell. This next video shows microscopically how Gram staining works.
Generally, the Gram stain correlates with the cell wall structure among the bacteria. The ethanol is thought to shrink the thick peptidoglycan in Gram-positive cells, thus retaining the dye. The thick, dehydrated peptidoglycan layer of Gram-positive bacteria appears to be a permeability barrier, preventing the loss of the crystal violet iodine complex. In contrast, the peptidoglycan in Gram-negative bacteria is very thin and has large pores. Ethanol may extract lipids and increase the porosity, thus removing the crystal violet iodine complex.
So when gonorrhea cells go through Gram staining, they will end up looking red. The morphology of this bacteria is diplococci. A coccus cell is spherical or ball-shaped, but can also be oval or bean-shaped. Diplo means two, or a pair, so diplococci means it is a pair of spherical-shaped cells, as shown on the picture on the right. Gonorrhea is non-motile, meaning it does not have self-propulsion. This picture shows a test that microbiologists use by putting a tiny mass of cells into a semi-solid medium into a test tube. If the cells grow rapidly through the entire medium, like the picture on the right, this indicates mobility in the bacteria. A non-motile bacteria, like gonorrhea, would move in one place but not make any progress, like the picture on the left. Gonorrhea is non-spore forming, and it has fimbriae or pili that operates mechanistically like a grappling hook. The signs of any bacteria are anything that can be objectively observed by someone other than the patient. The symptoms are something that is consciously affecting the patient, but can't be observed by another person. The signs of gonorrhea in females are the swelling of the vulva, increased vaginal discharge, and vaginal bleeding between periods. The symptoms of gonorrhea in females are pain in the pelvis, painful and or burning sensation while urinating, painful intercourse, and tenderness of the vulva. 4 out of 5 women have no symptoms. The signs of gonorrhea in males are white, yellow, or green discharge from the penis and sometimes swollen testicles. The symptoms in males are burning while urinating and sometimes painful testicles. 1 out of 10 males have no symptoms. Rectal infections in both males and females. The signs and symptoms are the same. They are anal itching and soreness, painful bowel movements, and anal bleeding or discharge. Rectal infections may cause no symptoms. Throat infections usually have no symptoms, but may cause a sore throat.
Fun fact about gonorrhea, it is thought that the slang name, the clap, came from the French term for a brothel, clapier, because it was so incredibly common to contract a disease there. Gonorrhea is the most common sexually transmitted disease in the world, with up to 2/3 of cases in those under the age of 25. The United States alone sees over 820,000 new cases every year. There is a 25% chance of catching this disease from an infected person. Gonorrhea can be passed through any kind of sexual contact, not just from sexual intercourse, and can affect the genitals, the rectum, and the throat. Gonococcal infections can also be spread by touching an infected area and then touching your eyes. Unfortunately, gonorrhea can also infect newborns during birth. When a mother who is infected with gonorrhea gives birth, the infection can transfer to the baby's eyes. This is called ophthalmia neonatorum. This infection of the eyes can cause blindness in newborns. The major reservoir for this disease is the asymptomatic carrier, meaning they have the disease but don't show symptoms. Just because there are no symptoms does not mean that the disease won't spread. Because women are more common to be asymptomatic, they are the more common reservoir. Little history on the disease. It was termed gonorrhea by a man named Galen in the 2nd century. Gonorrhea is Greek for the flow of seed. This is because they thought infected semen was the main cause of the virus. Because gonorrhea and syphilis are often found together, for a long time people thought they were symptoms of the same thing. In the 1500s, a Roman man named Paracelsus claimed that gonorrhea was just an early stage of syphilis and that they were the same thing. A few hundred years later, an English physician named John Hunter was experimenting with a way to cure gonorrhea. He was a leading authority on venereal diseases and agreed with the thought that gonorrhea and syphilis were both caused by the same thing. In one experiment, he inoculated a patient with pus from another patient that he thought only had gonorrhea. It turns out the patient he got the pus from had both gonorrhea and syphilis. When the inoculated patient ended up contracting both diseases, John Hunter believed that this experiment proved his theory that both diseases were caused by the same thing. It was not until 1879 when Albert Neisseria discovered the cause of gonorrhea and identified it separately from syphilis.
So, as far as treating gonorrhea, there are no vaccines currently recommended to treat it. That's still something researchers are working on. They're trying to find some sort of vaccine that will work with gonorrhea. However, people can currently get treatment using the antibiotic ceftriaxone, and it's typically given in combination with either azithromycin or doxycycline. They are both also antibiotics because gonorrhea usually occurs with chlamydia, and those two, azithromycin or doxycycline, will treat chlamydia. So the best way to prevent gonorrhea from happening in the first place, kind of similar with any other STD, is by remaining abstinent and not engaging in sexual activity until you're married and you have one partner. Basically, like living the law of chastity. But for those who do not prefer living that lifestyle, it's recommended to use protection during sexual activity and just to be careful. So I found this story on a blog. The author is Wendy Thomas, and I guess she spent some time as a clinical microbiologist. And so she relayed the story that deals with gonorrhea. I thought it was funny, so I wanted to include it in here. She said that she was testing a sample from a vaginal culture one day, and after gram staining the sample, it looked like it was gonorrhea to her. And so she went through a series of tests, and the last one she needed to do to confirm that it was gonorrhea was a smell test. If it had a certain smell to it, then she could tell that it was gonorrhea. So she brought the sample, the vaginal culture, up to her nose once, and she didn't smell anything. And then she brought it up to her nose a second time, still didn't smell anything. And she brought it up to her nose a third time. And what she didn't realize was that she was congested. She probably had a cold or something. So that particular day, she couldn't smell anything. So when she brought it up to her nose the third time, she brought it up a little too close, and her nose accidentally touched the gonorrhea sample. And so right away she washed it off and worried about the possibility of becoming infected with gonorrhea. In her blog it says, she also tried to think of how she would explain to the health department, who must be notified of every gonorrhea infection, how exactly it was that she managed to have a sexually transmitted disease up her nose. And then she said, fortunately she wasn't infected by the bacteria, but the story she was going to go with for everyone, including her mother, was immaculate infection. Luckily, she was not infected with gonorrhea, but the story continues to be told in her family, and she shares it with friends and things like that, and evidently in her blog. But that's not the end of the story. There's a little epilogue, I guess. So she has a son named Logan, and so one day Logan got the mom, Wendy, some little plush toys. They were gray, and they were meant to look like gonorrhea cells. And so they were kept in this little dish, and she thought it was cute and everything. And this kid was in 7th grade, so he asked his mom, the author, if he could bring it to class and show his teacher and his fellow students. She said sure, and she said, if you tell the teacher that it's gram negative, he'll probably give you extra credit. Well, turns out Logan shared much more than that. He told everyone that it was a reminder of the first time that his mom had gotten this an STD. So that's the story. There you have it.